Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. So this week I am in celebration of the Rogue Market, my secondary channel, most likely going to hit 3,000 subscribers this week. We're actually going to do a video that I do quite often on the Rogue Market, which is the top 10 most performing cards from a given tournament. So I just want to introduce my second channel. The reason why I made the Rogue Market was because of Market Monday was so successful and people are asking for more financial content. So it inspired me to create a second channel that was strictly finance. So if you like Market Monday and if you don't really care too much about the rest of the videos that I make on the Rogue Deck Builder, I understand that Rogue Deck Builder is all over the place. I do deck techs, I do behind the scenes at my local game store, I do box openings, I just do rant videos, I do whatever floats my boat for the day. The Rogue Market was a channel that I decided to create which would be strictly financial content. So if you do like this sort of content, I highly suggest you come over to YouTube/The Rogue Market and subscribe to this channel. One of my most successful video series here is I look at tournament results or new sets or just give some sort of metric to compare and give a top 10 list. So today I'm going to take inspiration from the Rogue Market channel and do a top 10 cards by performance number of War of the Spark Modern. So we're going to look at all the cards from War of the Spark that had the best showing. Now over the weekend there were a couple of Star City Games tournaments and a few other smaller tournaments. We've had a few tournaments on MTGO, and we actually have a decent little list to get inspiration from for the top 10 cards. So again, this isn't by dominance, this is by performance numbers, meaning the most amount of copies and the overall most amount of decks that I could actually get these from is where this list comes from. So anyway, let's just get right into it. Coming in at number 10 is Ashok. Ashok Dream Renderer saw a bit of play in blue decks that just could throw this in the sideboard. I'm assuming that black decks will start to adopt this too, but it was mainly in decks like Esper Control. This was in a Spirits list. I think there was an Ashok in the sideboard, and a Merfolk list also had one that was showcasing the Ashok that says this Sultai midrange as well had some Ashoks, and it was really just a one-of in the sideboard. So it was just the volume of decks that had one-ofs in the sideboard that had Ashok hit the top of the list. Now let me check my notes here. I believe 17 cards from War of the Spark saw play in Modern, which is just that is really phenomenal for a new set. We can sometimes hope for maybe one or two cards for hitting like maybe a one of or in a deck here and there. Yeah, we get some like Phoenix type cards that come out and can really change up, or even Assassin's Trophy from Guilds of Ravnica that can really change up the meta in Modern. But I don't think I've seen a set like War of the Spark that has just had so many cards see play in Modern decks. And there actually is a few decks that have been born due specifically because War of the Spark cards, and we'll get into those in a second. So Ashok did squeeze out about 6 other cards for this number 10 slot, and it again was just the amount of sideboard cards that had Ashok, or sideboards that had Ashok in them. So Ashok is mainly just brought in from the sideboard for against decks that tutor a lot. That's basically it. It's just an anti-tutor. You got to think of it like an Aven Mind Sensor type card, and it can really punish people that use fetch lands, use a lot of search tutors and things like that. All right, so on to my number 9. Now, number 9 is an interesting card because I just found one deck that actually utilized it. One or two decks actually utilized this, and this was the Spark Double. So Spark Double is a 4 mana. You may have a Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature, except if a creature or planeswalker, except it enters with additional +1/+1 or loses the legendary if it's a planeswalker or a legendary creature. So this was in a Sultai planeswalker list, which was pretty interesting. This was 4 of in this Sultai planeswalker had Liliana the Veil, Garruk Relentless. Haven't seen this card played in a long time in Modern. And then the typical Scavenging Ooze, Tarmogoyf, and this actually has Jace Vryn's Prodigy and Dark Confidant. So this is just going to be a value deck that is going to utilize a lot of control spells like Inquisition and Thoughtseize, Assassin's Trophy, Fatal Push, and then is going to follow it up with the finishers of getting Liliana big enough to ult, Garruk big enough to start tutoring for things, and just going to be the Tarmogoyf and Scavenging Ooze beatdown deck. So interesting that they threw Spark Double in here. I guess it's good enough to copy a Liliana of the Veil or even like another Jace. or anything at that point. It's kind of interesting that's the 4-drop they decided to put in Spark Double. So I'm not sold on this card. This shell has always been there, this kind of Sultai shell, and it doesn't, I mean, you could put, I'm sure this deck could have 5-0'd with a card like Hostage Taker, for example. So again, this just might be someone testing out a card in the form of Spark Double just to see how well it works. I'd have to see more lists actually start to 5-0 with this before I'm sold on the card. So that's very, very interesting though. So it is the number 9. All right, on to number 8. Now, all these are going to have more than 4 copies, of course. This is going to be the Finale of Devastation. So Finale of Devastation has saw a lot of play in decks that like the Kiki Jiki decks, and I believe the Vizier. The Vizier, the white-green devoted company. So this is the Vizier of Remedies, because Finale of Devastation can actually be your win con in that deck. When I saw this card spoiled, I thought this was the exact spot for this card, and lo and behold, it didn't take long for a 5-0 finish with Finale of Devastation in the mix. So basically, you try to assemble your Vizier of Remedies plus the Devoted Druid combo, and that equals infinite mana, meaning that if you have a Finale of Devastation, you can cast it for a ton and then give all your creatures +X and haste and swing in for lethal. But what makes Finale of Devastation really, really good in these type of decks is that it can actually be used to tutor up one of the missing pieces. So if you have either the Vizier of Remedies but not the Devoted Druid, it can go get the other copy. It can also even go get like I guess it can't get the Walking Ballista. I think they should find a better win condition besides Walking Ballista here, because Walking Ballista would come into play. I guess it would come into play with, yeah, because then you can actually put counter. So I think so enters the battlefield, put a creature on the battlefield if you search your library. Creature you can control is X+X. So yeah, I think it comes in as 0/0. It should disappear. Someone correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. However, Walking Bliss isn't necessary for the win con for these particular decks. Once you get up to infinite mana, Duskwatch Recruiter can then find all of your creatures. So I guess that the Finale of Devastation probably won't be used as a win con in this deck. I mean, it can lead to early win conditions with the Finale of Devastation. If you just get the Devoted Druid and the Vizier, then you can pump, and even your Devoted Druid at that point can swing in for lethal. So yeah, I guess that's the angle, and they're still using the Walking Ballista as the alternate way with the Duskwatch Recruiter to then go infinite mana and drop a Ballista that can shoot directly to face. So there was a number of these decks that did show up in the 5-0 with varying numbers. I think this is the one I found with the most, running 3 of. And I even like this in the regular old elf decks. I think it's a very, very good addition for the Finale of Devastation. And I believe I saw it in like a Kiki Jiki deck as another tutor for the Finale of Devastation. All right, on to the next one. This is the Dreadhorde Arcanist. Dreadhorde Arcanist is in a sort of like just a spells. I believe it was in, 4-color Arcanist was the deck, and I believe I saw it in a Wizards deck as well in that particular deck. So it just barely edged out the Finale of Devastation. If we come over here, this is a 4 of in this 4-colors Arcanist deck, and it is utilizing the Arclight Phoenix, the Soulscar Mage, and the Monastery Swiftspear. So you're going to have cards like the Metamorphose, the Thought Scour, the Mutagenic Growth, so it's just going to get a lot of value. If it has one turn to attack in, then you can actually cast those cards. If it does, no, it doesn't even have to deal combat damage, just whenever it attacks, you may cast target instant sorcery. So it's kind of weird with Arclight Phoenix, though. It's going to trigger after the fact, but it's still good enough for this deck because there's some other targets that even cards like Mutagenic Growth that it can cast, or Assault Strobes, things like that the Dreadhorde Arcanist can get some value off of. So interesting to throw this in this deck. Don't know if it's better than like a Snapcaster Mage in this particular deck, but I'd have to wait for more of the list to come out to see if this actually does solidify a spot in this particular archetype. It is pretty heavy with many cards in this 2-drop slot that actually work with these sort of Phoenix-based decks. I mean, this is kind of Thing in the Ice's spot. This is a typical Thing in the Ice deck here. Does look like it is more Become Immense, though, is what this is going off of. Assault Strobe, Become Immense, just to get a huge creature. The other one that I did see was a Wizards deck, so a mono red Wizards, and ran just basically all the bolts. What do they call that? Like the 16 bolt deck with Wizards. So the Soulscar Mage, Monastery Swiftspear, Dreadhorde Arcanist, and Can't remember the other wizards they run in that particular deck, just to reduce the cost of Wizard's Lightning, and the Dreadhorde Arcanist gets value off of that as well. So again, a little bit over, like 5, I believe, is over the list of the Dreadhorde Arcanist. So not a huge showing, but still enough to make the list. On to the next one, another red card. This is Finale of Promise. Now, this one saw a lot of play as a one-of in many decks, all the way from Grixis Control to a bunch of the Phoenix decks, and some even the Burn decks. There was a Zoo deck even that ran the Finale of Promise. So it says, is it Wizards here? But it's so weird with MTG Goldfish. A lot of these lists aren't showing up here. Like Finale of Promise, when you actually look over the list in the tournament, it will show up in more than just what it's saying down here. But Finale of Promise is basically just a one-of, but there's enough decks that were running a one-of. Feels like a Snapcaster Mage. As you, instead of leaving back a creature, you get 2 spells a lot of times for the same amount of mana that you throw into a Snapcaster. So, I mean, if you're like Snapcasting a Lightning Helix, that's 4 mana. And Finale Promise is very similar. So you're going to spend 2x and 2 red, and you can cast up to 1 target instant and 1 target sorcery card from your graveyard with converted mana cost X or less. So in like Burn, it's not terrible. You can hit like a Boros Charm and a Lightning Helix off of 4 mana, which is, very reasonable. And if there is any way you can get it up to a ton of mana, you get to copy the copies. But in this modern format, it's just used to utilize a lot of cheap spells, especially the burn-based spells that basically ends up just being a 2-for-1 with this card. On to the next one. This is Dovin's Veto. This saw a lot of 1-ofs and 2-ofs in many different decks, anything from sideboards and like Spirits, to in the main and Esper Control. This is an uncounterable negate, so that is pretty potent. An uncounterable negate is very, very good in formats like Tron, where, well, I guess Tron doesn't try to counter it, but I mean, the negate is just good enough for Modern. But when you have mirror matchups where you have to fight through your opponent's counterspells, Dovin's Veto is the uncounterable counterspell that puts you ahead. I mean, it really, really hits that perfect spell at the perfect time in those mirrors. So again, it showed up a lot of times in 1-ofs and 2-ofs. Can't be, especially like the spell queller type stuff too, that can't be countered is very, very relevant. All right, so now we're getting on to the juicy stuff. There is quite a bit of a leap from Dovin's Veto to the next one. The next one is Teferi Time Raveler. Again, this one saw quite a bit of play through basically any white and blue deck that could run Teferi seemed to run Teferi. Spirits was one of the lists. There were some Esper controls, some Jeskai controls that Teferi showed up in. It's showing up a lot in Legacy. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery, so it was very good to be a proactive card to stop your opponent from counterspelling anything, to shut down counterspells, shuts down instants. Instants have to be used as a sorcery, which is huge for tempo decks like Spirit, and very, very good for control against the mirrors. The value of returning up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand is pretty good, and then drawing a card, so you get to bounce something your opponent's doing, and then even stop them from casting instants at that point, and even being able to flash things in is very relevant in the right deck. So until end of turn, you may cast sorcery spells, though they add flash. So if you do utilize sorcery spells, I don't think the +1 was really the relevant point. It's really just shutting down your opponent's being able to cast instant speed spells, and then getting that initial bounce every couple turns made Teferi Time Raveler show up in the list. And this card is seeing a ton of play in Legacy, by the way. And now there is also a huge jump between Teferi and the next card. So this next card has really birthed an entire deck, and this is Neoform. So Neoform is a kind of an Eldritch Evolution type card, a 2 mana. You sacrifice a creature, search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost 1, plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost, and then it enters the battlefield with additional +1 counter. So what made Neoform so good is people figured out the combo with this Allosaur Rider. So Allosaur Rider states you may remove 2 green cards in your hand from the game rather than paying Allosaur Rider's mana cost. And then you Neoform it, and you can go get Gristlebrand. So that is the combo. So 7 mana turns into an 8 mana. You have a Gristlebrand now that your opponent has to deal with. I'm not sure. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a way. Okay, so then the combo is Laboratory Maniac. Then you draw your entire deck, or hopefully come close to drawing your entire deck, because then you can Nourishing Shoal away cards like the Auto-Chun Worm. And one of my favorite cards ever printed, it was actually the reason why I started the Rogue Deck Builder, was this card, Chancellor of the Tangle. If you haven't heard my origin story with Rogue Deck Builder, it was because I was playing a Chancellor of the Tangle deck in Standard at the time period that was trying to ramp out a turn 2 Hero of Bladehold, and it made an opponent rage and slam in his chair and said, have fun wasting your money with your rogue deck, or something to that effect. And that's how it kind of rolled off the tongue, Rogue Deck Builder, and a channel was born because of it. So we owe a lot to this Chancellor of the Tangle if you are a fan of the channel, and it's cool to see it actually see play in Modern, and it's really, really good in this particular deck because it does ramp you into that turn 1, turn 2 ability to get a Gristlebrand out. Usually don't want to turn 1 it though, because you'd have to find Manamorphose. Yeah, so it's definitely more of a turn 2. So you Chancellor of the Tangle is in your hand, then you can just use it for Nourishing Shoal. And drawing 7 cards is a free activation, or gaining 7 life is a free activation of Gristlebrand to draw 7 cards. So you're going to draw through your entire deck, find all the Simian Spirit Guides, throw down a Laboratory Maniac, and at that point just win the game. So pretty cool little combos in this deck. It's decently consistent too. Guess Lightning Storm's in here too, so it's kind of got this ad nauseum package, and also has the Eldritch Evolution as like more Neoform. So Eldritch Evolution can also be used with. So it's Eldritch Evolution says X is 2 plus sacrifice converted mana cost. A creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X. Okay, so that allows you to do X or less. That's how they're getting away with it with the Neoform and the Eldritch Evolution. Alrighty, so now we're really onto the juicy stuff. So even though that Neoform did birth a brand new deck, there are actually a few more cards that were more impactful on this first week of Modern than even this card. And the first one being Blast Zone. Blast Zone, I wasn't a believer of the card. I thought it would see a lot less play, like a lot of one-ofs. But I saw decks as high as 3-ofs with Blast Zone, and there were quite a few decks that I didn't think that they would see play in. I thought the home for Blast Zone would be Eldrazi and Taxes, or possibly Tron. I didn't think it would go in so many different decks. So Blast Zone enters the battlefield with a charge counter. You can pay 2 per charge, pay 3 and sacrifice to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters. And you can also 2 and tap and put, or XX and tap, put X charge counters on Blast Zone. So it's very versatile. If there's a lot of decks that are running permanents with very similar converted mana cost, we know how well the counter, what's the Spell Snare, works in this format, or even like Abrupt Decay. So you know that there's a lot of low converted mana cost permanents in this format. Think about Burn has a lot of 1-drops. There's a lot of 2-drops and things like Zoo. Blast Zone could just be a one-sided board wipe. And decks like Tron, after you've established your mana base, it's not even really hard to get a ton of counters on Blast Zone. So that's where it saw play. It saw a lot of play in the Eldrazi decks. And so red-green Eldrazi, mono-blue Tron, Lantern Control. There's some mono-blue. I believe this is another either Tron or Take Extra Turns, Sultai Midrange, mono-red Prison. Just saw a ton of play throughout Modern. So I still think this is a little bit rich for an $8 card from War of the Spark. I think this is more like a $4 card, even though it has seen that much play in Modern. In fact, this isn't really for a Market Monday, I'm not talking too much about Market. I guess I'll get into it right here. All of these cards, even though they did see play in Modern to some extent, I would not invest in anything from War of the Spark. War of the Spark is, just to give you perspective, we talked about it last week, it's on allotment. So for me to get it from distributors, I'm only allowed like a case a week, because that's how much of a shortage that we have. And it's not a shortage because of lack of printing. The first initial print wave, I guarantee you, was as large as Guilds of Ravnica, was as large as Ravnica Allegiance, was as large as Dominaria. This just shows you how much War of the Spark has sold. So those boxes are already in circulation. Those cards are already in circulation. What used to take a month, 2 months after release to totally circulate into the market, totally saturate the market, is already happening. So I'm thinking there's going to be a huge drop in all of War of the Spark cards even though it has a huge impact on standard, huge impact on modern, they're just going to continue to do another wave and another wave and another wave to meet demand. And as long as the price point, which the box EV is still hovering around $130 right now, there are going to be people that are going to try to mass box open this. So the supply is not due to lack of supply. The supply is due to just the obscene demand that we have seen from this set. So even a card like Blast Zone that saw as much play as it did week 1 in the modern scene, and all the other cards that we did last week that saw play in the standard scene, I do not like investing in War of the Spark. Anyway, with that said, let's get on to the last card in our list, and we'll wrap this video up. It saw more play than Blast Zone. It also, I would say, kind of birthed its own little deck, and a lot of even decks were just throwing this in because the combo is so good in the ability, if you can, generate the mana and then throw the card out. This is Karn, the Great Creator. So the combo is the Mycosynth Lattice. So activate abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated until your next turn. Up to one target non-artifact creature becomes an artifact creature power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost is the plus. That's something that is not that relevant, but occasionally relevant in some of the Tron decks. They run it. But with the combo too, you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or an exile, reveal that card and put it into your hand. So if we check over the deck list, these are, you see all the modern decks that it sees play in: Thopter Sword Prison, Mono Red Prison, Lantern, Mono Blue Tron. I saw it in just regular Tron decks, and a lot of showings here. So if we look at here with like the Mono Blue Tron, we'll pull one up that actually does run a lot of great. This is only running one of. Let's see if I can find the 4 of list again. Well, for example, what it does in this particular deck is it goes and grabs. This one, they're not even using it for the combo. I'm not even seeing it in the sideboard. Let me find another one here that throws the combo out. Let's look at this Lantern, see if this Lantern's running Karn. No Karn here. Karn, Great Creator. Okay, so here's one. So it goes and searches up the Mycosynth Lattice that says all permanents or artifacts in addition to their other types. All cards that aren't on the battlefield and permanents are colorless, and players may spend mana as though they were mana of any color. So what it does, though, is it turns all permanents into artifacts. And with Karn's basically being a Stony Silence, a one-sided Stony Silence, your opponents can no longer activate any permanents, including lands. So that is a combo. Anything that can then get up to the mana to 4 mana to find Karn, and then 6 mana to cast Mycosynth Lattice is going to lock out your opponent. So it's a win-con right there. So that's why some of the prison decks that are just trying to stall the game until you go Karn into Lattice are utilizing it, and that's some of the big mana decks can just ramp out this combo. So it did see by far the most copies played. At first it was kind of neck and neck with Blast Zone, but totaling up there was a lot more Karns. So that's good news for Karn. It is a rare, and it is having that $10 price point, which is, that's pretty reasonable. I think I like this one a little bit more because of the potential this has in the casual, rather than cards like Blast Zone just scream competitive, whereas Karn just and I guess this is another little topic for another day. We'll get more in depth. As a store owner, it's really opened my eyes as well to this phenomenon we call the casual player, where I sell so many just janky cards. We're talking about like the Crested Sunmare type cards, just cards that have Sunbond. Sunbond is a card I sell so many copies of. So here's the card I'm talking about. Sunbond. Enchanted creature, as whenever you gain life, put that many +1 counters on this creature. Absolutely terrible card in competitive. There's no way that this card could perform in competitive. But you can see that the uncommon out of Born of the Gods too is able to have a 65-cent price tag, and it's mainly just all casual. I wouldn't even say that Commander. I don't know if Commander plays this like exceptionally amount. It's casuals. They build these decks. They'll come get 4 of Sunbonds, and their friends will see it. Their friends will come in and get it. I think that Karn is the perfect card for that. So for that reason, I actually do think the price point of Karn is the one that's able to hold its price tag the best. There's also some pretty decent targets right now in Standard that Karn can go tutor up if you have like a toolbox artifacts in your sideboard. But I mean, that's all it really gets that's all Karn really gets right now is eligible to get out of the sideboard cards. And then EDH is kind of awkward too because there is technically no sideboard. It all depends on how your play group plays, how the -2 actually activates. If some play groups have a 10-card sideboard, some just say everything outside the game is the sideboard, and other people just say again. I don't think there's any official rules with it, but I'm assuming it probably will see a lot of play in Commander, even with just the even if people don't allow it to tutor, because you can just have the Mycosynth Lattice in your deck too, and it'll still combo. Well, there's a list again. Let's run down it real quickly. Ashok saw a lot of play in the sideboards for various decks shutting down, searching up the library. The Spark Double had a couple copies in different decks, but we don't know if it's actually just a card that typically goes in that 4-of slot that you can throw anything in. Then we have the Finale of Devastation, which I think is actually going to be one of the longer-term cards that's going to see a lot of play in Modern, just because it will go in the Vizier combo deck. We have the Dreadhorde Arcanist, again, that I don't know if it's solidified its slot. I like it mainly in the Wizard Lightning deck is where I think it is the best for that spot. The Finale of Promise starting to show up a ton as one-ofs in various decks. The Dovin's Veto, Uncountable Negate, yep, going to show up. Knew that was coming. Teferi, Time Raveler, very, very potent card in mirror matchups for control and tempo decks that want to shut down instant speed. We have the Neoform that birthed its entire deck, the Neo brand deck. The Blast Zone that saw a lot of 1-ofs, 2-ofs, 3-ofs in many different decks that can utilize big mana, or it just wants another versatile board wipe. And the Karn the Great Creator that saw the most copies out of all of the cards from War of the Spark. So in all this set is just a knockout of the park for both Standard and Modern. I don't really think that a lot of the cards are that warping either. I would take a lot of the cards out of War Spark right now in Standard over cards that I think are much more format defining, like Teferi or even Wilderness Reclamation. There's just a lot of good utility cards, a lot of cards that are great in their slots, and they're actually very, very fun to brew with. And I'll be getting to that video. I still need to make my top 10 cards that I want to brew around from War of the Spark. It's on my to-do list. I'm kind of backed up on video creation here, but I am going to get it out eventually. So hope you enjoyed this video for the Market Monday. If you enjoy this type of content, I usually put it even in a smaller form, more to the point, more researched on the Rogue Market. Rogue Market, I typically take those videos very seriously, really have the time to plan them out, not really script them, but at least get all the information at hand so I can run through a video in usually less than 20 minutes is the time that I've set for it. We even do under 10-minute videos. So if you're looking for videos that are again, more to the point, highly suggest you come over to the Rogue Market and give it a sub. And yeah, see if we can get this to 3K by the end of the week. Maybe at the end of this video, maybe we can get some people to sub to the Rogue Market. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.